Welcome, my dear students of class 12 to this English class with me, your tutor Atsinyo Sekose. Today we are going to take a look at your grammar section, that is modal auxiliaries. You would find it on page 20. Modal auxiliaries, page 20. Now, I am sure since you are in class 12, I'm sure you are very familiar with the rules and exceptions, the pros and cons that is to do with modal auxiliaries. So today, what we are going to do is we are simply going to revise a little bit, and then we are going to take a look at it from the perspective of usage, as in terms of speaking and writing. And here again, when I say usage, we are also going to consider the situation or the context, in what kind of context we are supposed to use the modal auxiliaries. Because when we say modal auxiliaries, we are referring to colored feelings. In fact, if you take a look at the word modal, you would find that it derives from the word mode, which means mood. And as the word suggests, mood here is representing feelings or emotions, we can say. And what are feelings and emotions? Are colored feelings. So that's why we are going to take a look at this lesson from the point of view of the speaker's feelings and the listener's understanding. So that is what we are going to look at, and that gives us the situation or the context. And what do we mean when we say situation or context? Now, context here can be different kinds of things, such as it can be formal or informal. It can be past or present. It can also be whether you are speaking or writing. So let me number it in this way. Under situation and context, the first point that we have is whether it is formal or informal. Second one we have is whether it is in the tense, past or present. And the third one, writing, whether you are writing it and using it, or whether you are speaking and using the modal auxiliaries. Now remember, a lot of miscommunications also takes place in the conversation because we failed to use the modal auxiliaries in the correct context. So that is why the context here is very important. And if you are able to distinguish between the context that we have here or situations, whether it is formal or informal, whether it is to do with speaking or whether it is to do with writing, all those of things would be clarified in today's class here. And we would not be discussing all the modal auxiliaries suggested in your text. So I would suggest that you go through it for revision. Like I said, you are very familiar with it. When we say modal auxiliaries, there are lots of modal auxiliaries. It is referring to helping verbs, and also we have a lot of modalities, such as is it being used for prediction, or is it being used for a possibility, is it being used in reference to ability in the present or in the past, and so on. See, so these modalities would change according to the context. So that is when we usually get confused. So if you are clear with in what kind of situation should I use the past or the present, in what kind of situation should I use the formal or the informal, that understanding would be, in fact, this confusion would be clarified. Now, let's take an example at the modal auxiliary, that is can. So as you can see in your text, can here is referring to an ability, and it can also be used in the past form. Now, this is not only the rules that is applied to the modal auxiliary, that is can. Remember, depending on the context, you would be able to reflect your emotions. After all, it is supposed to do with colored feelings, the speaker's emotions that is represented through the words such as the use of modal auxiliaries. So that is why we cannot really say there is a hard and fast rule to the modalities here. So in some kind of situations, it may also represent regret. I wish I could help that person. You see, there was a choice, and then you, let's just say that you failed to help a person when you could have. So see, those are all modal auxiliaries, and that is when the context changes. And when the context changes, you would get confused. If you really stick to the rules that we have here, you would get more confused. When you are expressing, take the example of, I wish I could have helped that person. That is happening at the moment of speaking. At the moment of speaking, you are expressing a regret here. So when you are in the present, again, the confusion with the tense here. When you are in the present, I'm sure you have learned that you are supposed to speak in the present tense. But using the modal auxiliary could confuses us. Why? Because here we are referring to something that could have happened in the past, but you are saying it at the moment of speaking. So there is the difference. And if you're already familiar with the timeline, I'm sure this would have been clarified now. That's why what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, it is very important for you to look into the rules and exceptions, but that is not all. Because when we are using it, when we are speaking or when we are writing, it creates a lot of confusion. So that is when you need to understand the context better. What is the context? Think about it. Is it formal? Is it informal? Am I using it in terms of speaking, or am I using it in terms of writing? Now, talking about writing here, let me also point out another example. In your writing section, we have already done invitation. And under invitation, depending on the kind of question you are getting, you are supposed to decide whether the language is supposed to be formal or informal. So see, if you are drafting an invitation, a formal invitation, the language is supposed to be informal. Or for that matter, if it is a business letter, if you could kindly send me, supposing you are writing a business letter. So the context here is writing and you are requesting. So if you could kindly, so here we have just discussed, it can also express regret or request. So this is when it becomes a little confusing, but that is why I'm saying that you have to refer to the context first. And then remember, in your formal invitations or formal letters, in the layout and in the understanding of the format of the language structure, we have learned that it is supposed to be formal. So what does it mean, formal language? This is what we meant by formal language. You are supposed to use the formal language, and formal language is usually in the past tense. Formal language is usually, the modal auxiliaries would be in the past tense, regardless of whether we are making a reference to the time tenses or not. So I hope that clarifies things up. Now let's take a look at the context of speaking. Let's take a look at the context of speaking, taking in a scenario here. Let's say our scenario or situation or context, whatever you prefer there. Let's say the speaker is you and you are talking to a friend. So that is the scenario here. And you wanted to borrow something from your friend. So you would use, can you lend me your pencil or your pen, and so on. So that is the situation here. You are not using could. Now, if this friend is someone that let's say this friend is your best friend, your BFF or whatever the case may be here. So if that is the case and suddenly you started using the modal auxiliaries in the past tense in a very polite manner, such as, could you please lend me your pencil, and so on, or shall I help you, mother, in the kitchen? Supposing you have turned your modal auxiliaries in a very polite manner, shall I help you in the kitchen? Let's say you said like that to your mother. This is scenario 1, this is scenario 2. So in these kind of cases, the listener or the receiver of the message might probably get the wrong impression here. Take the example of the first scenario. Can you lend me your pen or pencil? Your friend would, I'm sure if it is your friend, they would not mind doing that. But supposing you said, could you please lend me your pencil? Then if it is a very good friendly, close connection or a friendship that you share, then your friend might go into thinking, why is she suddenly being so polite? Have I done something wrong? It may also lead to that kind of impression. Why is it that my friend has become suddenly so distant with me? So see, the connection of that kind of a bond can also be misinterpreted just simply because you chose the wrong modal auxiliary verb. So again, taking the example of the second example, let's say, shall I help you, mother? Now, you are being very polite here when you could have just simply said, because your mother is someone that you know and very familiar with, you could have just said, can I help you? Or should I help you, mother? And so on. But in this case here, you have opted for a very polite modal auxiliary such as shall, formal modal auxiliary. So your mother might go into thinking that, now why is my daughter, or now why is my son being very polite? Does he want something? That kind of see, the subtext of communication can get distorted just simply because you have chosen the wrong modal auxiliaries. And again, it is also reflecting the person's the person's emotions, such as maybe the person feels that the mother and son's relationship is very formal, so maybe that is the kind of language that you use. That can be also the context, or the context here is that the son wants something really bad and want to help and impress the mother and then get something out of that. See, that kind of a context needs to be considered, and that's why modal auxiliaries can be tricky. It can either create a good impression of you, or you would be labeled as rude on your part. So we have to consider the situation and the context. In fact, if you think about the situation and the context, you need not worry, should I use can or could, should I use shall or should, and so on. Those kind of confusion would not be there. So that is what we have here. And let's take in another scenario here. Let's continue with the scenario of you and a stranger. And let's say our context here is writing. So we have discussed briefly about a little bit about writing context, and the same thing applies here. If you are writing to a stranger, that would mean that your context is formal instead of informal. Now, taking another scenario, if you're writing a letter to your friend, now the scenario changes, a letter to your friend, let's say, or for that matter, a relative, or for that matter, let's say you are writing, let's just say you are texting a friend. In that kind of situation, naturally, you would have opted for the informal language, and the informal language, if you are using modal auxiliaries, you would have opted for simple present modal auxiliaries such as can, will, and so on, instead of would. So I hope that creates the understanding of the context here. If it is a complete stranger, usually we want to be polite. So that's when we use the formal and past form of modal auxiliary. That's what we have here. Now, in a very quick manner, let's briefly go over this lesson very quickly again. So when we say modal auxiliaries, we meant here those helping verbs that makes more sense, create more sense to the verb here. And it expresses our emotions, our feelings, it reflects that. So we have to choose from the context or situation, consider whether it is formal or informal, consider whether it should be in the past or in the present. In fact, if you are clear with whether it is formal or informal, you would have no problem in the choosing whether the language is supposed to be past or present. And then you have to consider whether you are writing or speaking. Again, under writing, you have to consider whether it is a friendly letter, whether it is a friendly business letter, and so on. The kind of relation that you have with the person that also have a play in the writing, no doubt. And the same case with speaking. If it is let me give you another example here. If it is someone who is in authority and you are speaking, again, that would become a formal language. Because if it is someone in authority and someone who is older than you cannot go for casual language such as, can I have this, and so on. Or take the example of, let's say you are asking the time to a stranger and that person is an elderly person. Then in that case, what is the time? Could you please tell me what is the time by your watch? See, could you please? Even if you are speaking, you are using that could. Even the same case with writing here. So, but supposing you are going to ask that to someone that you are very familiar with, you could have said, can you please tell me what is the time by your watch? So the context brings in the differences between whether to use formal or informal, past or present, writing or speaking. And I hope I hope this lesson creates that understanding of how all your lessons, whether it is from the prose section or poetry section, grammar or speaking skills, listening skills, are all interconnected. And I hope you would be able to take some time to use these and use it in your speaking skills as well, in terms of usage as well. So on that note, we would be winding up today's class. Thank you all very much for joining me.